Welcome to Lee Reads. I'm Lee. This is a blog where I like to talk about books that I read, books that I haven't read yet, and how reading fits into my life. Welcome back. I'm glad you're here. Please ignore the graveyard of IKEA desk pieces that's behind me. My partner and I got halfway through redoing the living room. Now it's 2 a.m., they're asleep, and I am up late because I'm very excited to talk to you guys about my least favorite books of 2025. I read 58, and these are the 5 that drove me up the wall. I am someone that almost never starts a book without finishing it because I generally want to see if it gets better toward the end or if there's something that I'm missing that's going to make it good. I don't usually like torture myself, but because I read a lot, I'm like, you know what, I have time to finish these books that I think I'm not liking. So here's 5 books that I did not enjoy even though I read all the way to the end. Book number 5. To be fair, a family member got me this book because I asked specifically for a mass market linguistics book. That is exactly what this book is. They got me exactly what I wanted. It just turned out that the book was not good. So this is The Babel Message by Kahn-Harris. Seemed like it had a good premise. He studies the warning label in Kinder candies and how it's written in different languages and what areas use which languages and which languages have it translated into their language and which ones don't. And he uses it as a way to talk about politics behind what languages get a warning label and which ones don't. And some of it is just a love letter to language. So he just talks about how the language looks and how it sounds and is it aesthetically appealing, etc. It starts off boring and then it does not manage to become interesting at any point. He's like, aren't these letters kind of beautiful and they look like clouds? And you're like, yeah, the language in Bhutan kind of looks like clouds. It's not interesting. And then like it's distributed in China and they don't, well, okay, to be fair, it is interesting that they write it in like Mandarin Chinese and not in Tibetan. I'll give them that, but like it went on for a long time. Can't recommend, even if you're someone who likes languages like I do. It just never went anywhere. Book number 4, Moby Dyke by Krista Burton. This book is about her going to every remaining lesbian bar in America to see what the bars are like and to compare them and to talk about the way that the lesbian scene has changed over the years. She's married to a trans man who like has a big old beard, and so part of the beginning of the book is her being like, how is my partner going to be treated when I get to the lesbian bars? And the joke is every single lesbian bar in America is like exactly the same and every single lesbian bar is welcoming to everybody. And I almost feel bad like trashing this book right now because throughout the entire book she's constantly telling you about how she's taken out all these loans and spent all of her savings on writing this book and on the travel to write this book, and they give her like $1,000 advance and she tells you that in the introduction. And so I felt like very guilty the entire time being like, wow, I should really be supporting this author because she really went above her means to write this book, and then the book that she wrote was not good. So it's super repetitive, it's overly cutesy, and I listened to the audiobook and the audiobook reader doubled the overly cutesiness, and so it had like way too much personality with like absolutely no substance. I already said it's repetitive, and she kind of makes the joke throughout the book that it's kind of repetitive. I will say the only place that she didn't like the lesbian bar was Denver because it had like super bad vibes, and as someone who used to live in Denver, I'm like, yeah, the lesbian bar in Denver would have super bad vibes. So I appreciate that, Krista. The only other part of it that I really enjoyed was she does have an interesting story about dealing with family homophobia and her background and how she dealt with like being able to have a relationship with her parents as an adult, even though she's a lesbian and grows up with a ton of homophobia. And so I thought that was actually kind of like a novel approach to it. And so I give her props for that. She did try to braid interesting stories from her life into the stories of visiting the lesbian bars, but none of it was interesting enough to like really capture your attention. The only reason that I finished it is because I was reading it for my queer book group. Cannot recommend. It sounds like it should be really cute and like a nice romp. I will say I'm very happy for all the lesbian bars and the communities that have a lesbian bar. They seem like they're really nice places and all the owners really care and they're all doing a good job. But oh boy, you could read just like the last 50 pages and you would have read the entire book. She's not problematic, but oh my gosh, so boring. Book number 3, Migrations by Charlotte McConaughey. Got this from a book club again. They accidentally sent me 2 copies, and so I had to get rid of 2 copies of this book that sucked. So the premise is we've almost completed the extinction of all of the animals because of climate change and pollution and overfishing and overhunting. The human population is like totally fine still, which I find not very credible, but we're at the end years of climate change and our narrator is kind of an ecologist and kind of just like someone who loves birds, which I love birds too, that's great. It's very much in the genre of like white woman has traumatic childhood and therefore does inexplicable behavior throughout the entire rest of her life, and I wrote a whole book about her inexplicable and frustrating behavior. So she has like this wonderful husband and she loves him so much and she just has to run away from him, and it's trying to do like a selkie, like Irish thing. She's just, you know, taken out onto the sea, but it's not, it didn't give. I particularly enjoyed the moment where she was like, I have to take a trip to escape from my wonderful husband who I love so much. And so what she does is she flies on an airplane from Scotland to Yellowstone and just like spends a couple weeks in nature in Yellowstone. And this is after almost every bird species has gone extinct. And I'm just confused about like the world where ecologists are still flying across the Atlantic for like a vacation when there are literally no birds left. Like, what are we doing at that point with this kind of behavior? And the gripe I have with it is about this sort of climate denialism and the fact that the world that it paints in this like almost apocalyptic climate scenario, it essentially is exactly the same as the world that we live in today, but just like way worse, and the exact same amount of awareness and the exact same amount of taking responsibility. And of course, everyone's very angry, for example, at the fishermen who have overfished the oceans. And so there are like protests in every port against fishermen, and she's on a fishing vessel so that she can do her bird research. And there's this like really stupid thing where she gets off the fishing vessel and there's these protests. The environmentalists are so mad about the fishing vessels. And then one of the environmentalists who's protesting tries to sexually assault her and then physically assaults her, and she has to fight back. And that's how we learn that even people who care about the environment, you know, that doesn't mean that they won't try to do harm in other ways, whereas those fishermen on the boat are pretty nice, which is, I believe that fishermen can be nice without also having to be like, people who are angry and protesting for like us to treat the environment better are probably secretly dangerous, violent criminals at heart. I just thought that was kind of interesting. I will say it's a good story. The pacing of it is good. The way that the events build up toward the climax is good. And I actually did really like the ending. The description of the ending was the only like nature part that I actually enjoyed. So I did enjoy it as a story, which is why I managed to give it away, because it is good like reading for while you're bored and you're on a bus or whatever. Hopefully you don't read it while you're on a plane. But it just had this incredibly pessimistic take on our future, and yet I'm like, if you want to write about the climate going bad so bad, then why don't you like get a little bit wider imagination? Like there could actually be a lot of interesting books about that. This was not one. So world building, hated it. Plot, it was interesting. Main character, big thumbs down. Side characters, some of them were kind of cute. Book number 2, Becoming Dangerous. This is a book of essays. And to be fair, I think I just hate books of essays because the author doesn't have very much time to bring you into their world and like create something interesting. And so they end up having to do a lot of telling and kind of shoehorn in a conclusion. So it might be just that like this genre doesn't work for me. When I picked up this book at the library, it felt like a synchronicity because I had just picked up another book that had almost exactly the same cover. And I did like the Ishiguro book much better. They ended up being not similar at all. This was not a synchronicity. So the essays are supposed to be about being witchy and being politically rebellious. And so the concept is sort of everyday witchery to, you know, be a rebel in these trying times. Theoretically, it's like feminist, it's interesting, it's cool, I'm into witchy stuff. I was like, oh, maybe I can read this and like learn how other people are doing their witchy stuff. There was almost no actual magic, and instead all there was reflections on like being a woman these days. So there was literally like 6 pages of an essay where someone was teaching us what products we could buy to do skincare, because skincare is like a spell. There was like a whole essay about like wearing sexy underwear because being sexy is kind of like a spell. And I'm actually fine with like wearing sexy underwear or wearing makeup. Those things are totally fine to do. But if we're not like thinking at all about the broader context of the motivation behind that, then it's not all that interesting. And also it like sort of had nothing to do with magic, or at least the authors did not convince me that it had anything to do with magic. There was one bright spot. There was a really, really, really good essay, and it was the second essay. And so that made me read the whole book because I was like, what if there's another good one? By somebody named Miranda Elizabeth. And the name of the essay is Trash Magic, Signs and Rituals for the Unwanted. I loved it, and it was about finding things in dumpsters and finding things on the street that just show up at the exact time that you need. Real synchronicities, trash synchronicities. And that essay made me start collecting milk crates, which have been a really great addition to my life in 2025. So love Miranda Elizabeth. That was the only essay where there was actual intentionality about the magic. That's an oversimplification, but it was so dumb, you guys. Okay, don't read that book, except do read that one essay by Miranda Elizabeth. We love raccoon trash magic. Book number 1. This is the book that I hated the most in 2025, and I think part of why I hated it so much was that it was a huge letdown from the many, many people who had recommended it so highly, and part of the reason why I hated it was because it was horrible. And that book is Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. Okay, I'm gonna talk about the plot first, and I guess I'm gonna give spoilers, not super specific, but okay. The end of the book is like, and the power of friendship compelled them to forget all those things that happened in their past and realize that they cared for each other and they could find forgiveness in their hearts and they could just move on and be friends just like they were before, even though everything was different. Isn't that beautiful? So super boring. The characters don't really change as people over the time, although they do get worse over time, but they like don't actually develop. It was very boring toward the end as well. Part of how the friends get back together is that one of the friends designs a whole game for the other friend to play so that the friend will like learn that the other friend still loves her. It was so boring. Even the really big plot points of like the unforgivable stuff that they did to each other, the things that they have these big fights about, are never actually addressed or like dealt with. There's no actual like coming together. All there is ever is just moving on, and I literally cannot understand how this is like a good way to move on. It to me is just like they have the same friendship making up over and over, and it never comes with like accountability and understanding each other and dealing with all those things that happened in the past. Now, one of those things that happened in the past is that the main woman character has a relationship with one of her professors when she is in college. And the book is trying to give us this sort of ambivalent picture of, you know, she's an adult and she feels like she's consenting, but the power dynamics are super weird, and there's aspects of it that are like, clearly she's not like consenting enthusiastically. And so I love a good story where we like think about, you know, everybody's agency and what truly was your feeling in this ambivalent and complicated situation. I would like to recommend the Ruth Ozeki book that I just started reading called All Over Creation. Similar dynamic, but actually portrayed interestingly and actually with some accountability and some real study of what had gone on in that dynamic, because the stuff that goes on in Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow is super disturbing, and then it's literally never dealt with. The adult, like after this person grows up, like 10 years later, she like is so angry at her best friend because her best friend had known that she was in this like quasi-abusive relationship and had encouraged her to like get closer to the abuser so that they could have business success. And she's so furious at her friend that the friend knew this and caused her to like sort of get indebted to this abuser anyway. That's one of the things that they never deal with in the friendship later on. But then she also individually doesn't deal with it because she's like so mad at her best friend for putting her in this situation. But then she also is like going out to a casual friendly lunch with the abuser himself 10 years later when she has all this power. And so I don't understand how the author's like, yeah, she knew that it was like a violation and so she's really mad at her friend for putting her in that position, but then she's like friends with the guy that did it. And it's not even like friends in a complicated way. I truly do not believe that the author was trying to show us that this character has like internal conflict about this thing that's happening. She literally just is like, you know, back then, haha. It's so weird. Now, let's speak about this abusive person in our main character's life. This is my cultural critique of this book because this book totally normalizes the settler colonial project of the state of Israel. First of all, the character who is her professor that sleeps with her when she's 18 is Israeli. So most of the main characters in this book are Jewish, and that like continuously is part of the story. But this professor is Jewish and Israeli. And early in their relationship, he's like, you know nothing about Israel. You have no idea what it's like over there. And so she's 18 and she like goes out, and the book says basically like she read a book about the founding of Israel, period. Next paragraph, no commentary on that. And I'm like, okay, so you read a book about the violent ethnic cleansing that was the founding of the state of Israel, period. End of paragraph. No thoughts or comments on that. So first of all, the book is like definitively at least normalizes this project. But I also thought that the portrayal of this professor character, whose name is Dove, was definitively Orientalist, very like racist and colorist, and to me like borders on anti-Semitic, because he is the only Israeli Jew in the whole book, and he's the one who is like rapacious and violent and out of control and has this crazy temper, and his physical features are described as being like Middle Eastern looking. And his last name is literally Mizrah. So Mizrah means like North African and West Asian Jewish. So it is a common last name, but Mizrah literally is an ethnicity, or at least like an ethnicity within an ethnicity. And so to like literally have this guy's name be like Dove Middle Eastern, and then he's the like creepy, rapey, bad, violent character who makes like video games about violence, and the rest of their video games are about like friendship and getting lost and getting found again. I truly believe that this was just like the author's blind spot, is she's like, oh, let me create like a gross, scary character and I'll make him be dark-skinned and Middle Eastern. I just can't get down with that. It just was like very literally racist, and then the Israeli part of it never gets dealt with. None of the cultural things of that ever get dealt with. None of the like sexual trauma part of it ever gets dealt with. That book gets an F-. I literally didn't, I liked the beginning of it. I thought it was going somewhere. I was excited. I loved the grandmother character. I liked the descriptions of them being younger. The rest of it, that book sucked. I'm sorry. So if you agree with any of my mean rantings about the books, if you disagree, if you think that there's like some beautiful thing in any of these books that I have missed out on, please tell me. I don't feel like I wasted my time, right? Any book you get something from, and even if you just get something to rant about, I think that's great. But if you have something to add, if there's something that I missed, please tell me so that I don't have to just like hate these books and these authors forever. I would love to hear your takes. I would love to hear recommendations, and especially if there are books that are like similar to what I wanted these books to be. Please tell me if there's like a book that is like these books but actually good instead of being bad. So I'll do the first one. Instead of tomorrow, please read All Over Creation by Ruth Ozeki. Please tell me in the comments if there is a different book that I can read that would help me actually achieve the goals that I had of the other 4. Thank you so much for being here. You can like and subscribe to get more reading content and book content. And yeah, let's keep reading.